Um, Before we start, I'd like to take a step back and invite each one of you to briefly introduce yourself and your connection to this particular topic. If you agree, I'll do this alphabetically. Andy, would you like to introduce a little bit of yourself on what you do and your connection to this topic in very shortly in 1 minute, please?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My role at the Parliamentary Council in New Zealand is Deputy Chief Executive for Access and Digital Services. So my group provides a lot of the supporting services to drafters, legal assistance, editing, proofreading, publishing, and so on. But I also run and provide the digital drafting services for our organization. We, perhaps like many of you, are investigating and looking into new options to improve our processes, such as those opportunities given by AI. So it's a very timely topic, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's a pleasure to welcome you here today. Grant, would you like to introduce yourself to us and your connection to this topic?
Sure. My name is Grant Vergottini. I've been in this area for 22 years now, building drafting tools for legislatures around the world, starting with California. We do work at the federal level as well. I've worked in the UK and Hong Kong and other parts of the world. I'm also one of the 4 permanent members of the Tozo standards body with OASIS, working with my colleagues at the University of Bologna and the European Commission.
Thank you so much, Grant, for your introduction. Jurgens, would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Thank you, Luís. Yeah, I'm the Management Information Systems Manager at Parliament. I've also got business analysts reporting to me, so we're looking at their business requirements and the systems that they need, and then specify those systems. So in that regard, we have been looking at the legislative drafting for quite a time, and that's why I'm on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jurgens. Dr. Jaja, would you like to briefly introduce yourself to us and your connection to this topic?
Okay, thank you. I am a lawyer. I hold a master's degree in legislative drafting and then a PhD degree in legislative drafting from the University of London. Since 2012, I've served as editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Legislative Drafting. It's published by the Canadian Legal Information Institute in Ontario. I also teach at the University of Benin in Nigeria. We have a master's program in legislative drafting, LLM legislative drafting. I lecture a course titled Comparative Legislative Drafting. I work with the National for over 10 years now, with the National Institute for Legislative Studies. This is the research arm of the National Assembly of Nigeria. The National Assembly of Nigeria is the national parliament or legislature of Nigeria, made up of 469 members. As a lawyer, I provide legislative drafting services for the legislators, legal research services, and then provide training for the staff of the National Assembly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaja, for your introduction as well. I have prepared a few questions to each one of you, and after the first colleague responds, I will invite all the others to share their views and comments as well. First, allow me to start with you, Andy. As we explore this intersection of technology and the parliamentary activities, AI presents an unprecedented opportunity for innovation, particularly in legislative drafting, and all of its supporting activities. From improving the efficiency and accuracy of drafting processes to enabling predictive analysis of the legislative impact. AI has numerous possibilities within this domain of parliamentary activity. So, given this background, what are your perspectives on the possibilities and future applications of AI in the drafting offices of parliaments and in Commonwealth countries, the drafting offices in the executive branch as well? Feel free to use the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. And again, thank you for the invitation. Let me start by saying that, I'm not, and I've never been a drafter. So my comments perhaps come from a slightly different perspective. As someone who, as I mentioned, instead provides the supporting services to drafters and looks after the technology. I think the possibilities for the use of AI and legislative drafting, of course, they're significant, and so are the challenges. I think my opening comment is that I find it helpful to think of the opportunities and challenges as a change process. Perhaps like many, my natural instinct is to jump directly into the technical possibilities with AI because personally I find it very exciting, as I'm sure many others do, and we can see there are all manner of tools and techniques that can be applied in the drafting domain. I mean, you only have to look at some of the experiments with LLMs and contract negotiation, just as an example, to see how quickly things are progressing. Certainly in other areas of the legal domain as well. But if we put technology to one side just for a minute and think about the outcomes we value, I think it can create a useful perspective to guide us. So, in New Zealand, we seek to create great law, we say, making sure it's accessible, fit for purpose, and constitutionally sound. And perhaps you've got, something equivalent in your own jurisdiction. And we need to be careful not to make AI and technology in general the driving force of our work. The driving force is great law or the equivalent for you, which is why I come back to my opening comment for thinking about the opportunities and challenges as a change process, because for me, that means being human-centered. And the big opportunity, therefore, is to be able to sit with my staff and talk with officials and work with our parliament to ask, how can we make this better for you and for our system of law, regardless of the technology. So I certainly have ideas and things I'm excited about in the AI space for legislative drafting. And perhaps we'll get to more of that in the panel. But I wanted to just start out by saying that, for me personally, I have to be careful that my excitement with technology doesn't take me away from what people need or will value most in the legislative drafting process. So perhaps I'll leave it there for now, and I can add some more comments later.
Thank you so much, Andy, for your comments. Jurgens, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well?
Thank you, Luís. Yeah, for me, I love the imagination. Imagine a world where legislation is crafted with unprecedented precision and efficiency, thanks to the power of artificial intelligence. This is not a dystopian tale. the dawn of the future where human judgment and empathy joins forces with AI's analytical prowess. And that will usher in a new area of responsible and responsive lawmaking. If we look, for example, at generative AI, it gives us a glimpse into the future. It helps us to predict the ripple effect of the laws before they are enacted. It's like a crystal ball revealing the potential pitfalls and unforeseen consequences, allowing legislators to craft more informed and impactful legislations. But that's not where AI stops. It can also help us to decipher the cacophony of public voices and filtering through diverse inputs into the legislative drafting process from various stakeholders, interest groups, ensuring all perspectives are heard and considered. I think it's the Estonian Parliament. Their AI-powered system is a testament to the power of automation. Imagine drafts automatically reviewed for inconsistencies and errors, saving precious hours and minimizing legal loopholes. That is the tip of the iceberg. When we look at large language models, I have seen, I don't know if you know it, but the LIDA system was already developed in 1980 as an AI-driven system, looking at the slashing research by half at that time and to simplify the complex legalese. So we've already got systems that we can use. But then AI is not just about the efficiency, it's about humanizing data. Imagine petitions categorized not just by dry numbers, but by the hopes and the fears and the frustrations that the people hold in those petitions. We need also to find an empathy-driven approach that allows legislatures to truly grasp the pulse of the public, guiding them towards legislation that resonates with real-world needs. And I think that's the power that we can find in legislation. That's not all. AI can identify areas of controversy and conflict, ensuring that laws are internally sound. They can withstand the test of time. It can even generate diverse legal options, empowering legislators to craft informed choices based on a wide range of possibilities, not just being stuck on one narrative. Of course, human judgment remains the cornerstone of lawmaking. AI does not replace the irreplaceable. It augments, it amplifies, it empowers the human hand. It frees the drafters from tedious tasks, allowing them to focus on the intricate dance of policy consideration and ethical implications. So I think those are the things for me that's really important in terms of the question you ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jurgens, for the very insightful comments that you brought. Grant, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well, and on what the colleagues just shared?
Sure. I'm probably going to sound more like the voice of caution than the voice of the future. I've been in this field for 22 years now, and when I entered into it, I saw a field that had all these possibilities, and over time I've learned the pace of change in legislative drafting is very measured and very cautious. About a year ago, I was questioned by someone in the press about the future of legislative drafting and AI, and they were trying very hard to get me to say that laws in the future would be drafted by AI. That is what they wanted to hear from me. I've tried very hard not to say that, although the story that came out ended up making it sound like I said that. I think, though, that the reality is going to be much more down to earth in the short term. I think what we're going to find are tools that augment the intellectual work of the attorney and don't replace it. They help them do what they do better by helping to give them insights into what they're seeing, into what they're drafting. There's something that's becoming important to us as a subject, something called preemption, where at the municipal level, as they're drafting law, they need to understand how that law fits in the context of the laws above them. Are they drafting laws that are illegal at the next level up or even at the federal level? Providing tools that allow them to see that quickly and accurately, and do that intellectual work to provide guidance rather than actually doing the drafting themselves for them, I think is where we're going in the short term.
Thank you so much, Grant. Just a very brief comment. This, as a political scientist myself, I studied this challenge here in Brazil because we have 5,568 city councils and 27 state assemblies. And I lost count on how many times they approved a law that was unconstitutional. And for reasons I cannot understand, not only they voted, but they approved. And it didn't occur to anyone to actually make this process as you are suggesting, to understand if this is in conformity to the state constitution, to the federal constitution in Brazil at least. So I second everything you just said, not only in the US, but also here in Brazil and certainly in other countries as well at the subnational level. And Dr. Jaja, would you like to share your thoughts and close this round?
Yes, I see a lot of possibility. One of the problems we have in Nigeria is by virtue of the 1993 Treaty Making Procedure Act, there's supposed to be a register of all the treaties of Nigeria kept by the Minister of Justice. However, that does not happen. I see a possibility of having a digital register because right now it's hard copies we have. So translation of treaties into domestic, because Nigeria is different from Brazil and civil law jurisdictions. If we have a treaty, if Nigeria ratifies a treaty at the UN, we still have to come home and the National Assembly of Nigeria has to enact a law before that treaty would have effect in Nigeria. That's because of our constitution, section 12. Now, if AI is involved, to make this process seamless, so that at the point where we ratify the treaty at the UN, United Nations, automatically the National Assembly of Nigeria should begin the process of enacting a domestic law to give effect to the treaty. We have over 300 treaties in Nigeria that have not been enacted by the National Assembly. And if they do not enact those laws, it will not have effect in the territory of Nigeria. So I'm thinking towards a seamless transition or translation of international treaties into domestic legislation. Another area I think Nigeria would need AI is the Constitution of Nigeria says every legislation should be in the 3 major languages, Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba. Right now, we only have legislation in English language. The other official languages are the 3 official languages. So I'm thinking if we have an AI that can translate from English to the 3 Nigerian languages. We tried it. We translated the Constitution of Nigeria into Igbo language, just 1 language, remaining the other 2 other official languages, which is Hausa and Yoruba. We have not yet translated the Constitution, which is a major legislation in Nigeria. So there's still a lot to do with AI to do in legislative drafting. As I said earlier during the other presentation, we do not yet have a standard, a uniform legislative, customized legislative drafting software for the National Assembly of Nigeria. Everybody does his own thing. So we look forward to having such innovations in legislative drafting in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for the very insightful comments on this matter. Jurgens, allow me to bring my next question to you, and I will take a less obvious road right now. We discussed now the core of legislative drafting, the challenges that we have. But in my next question, I wanted to discuss from the door of the drafting office out, before we actually use the very valuable time of drafters in parliaments or on the office that support parliament. Specifically on how can we improve the efficiency of these offices with functionalities, for example, such as the automated distribution of requests to specialized and thematic legislative council groups, or the semantic analysis of legislative drafting requests. They also have shown huge potential on significantly enhancing efficiency and accuracy. Just to name two, these AI-driven processes can automate the categorization of complex requests and analyze the content of legislative proposals to identify similarities with existing documents, studies, for example, thereby streamlining the legislative workflow. So, given all of these context and these advancements that would be possible, for example, we have such an implementation here in Brazil in the Chamber of Deputies. What are your perspectives about using AI in these supporting activities to the drafting office of the Parliament? And my second question is, what other supporting activities from the drafting office could we use artificial intelligence in its processes?
Thank you very much. Yeah, you know that the traditional image of a drafting office is paper strewn over the desk, mountains of legal tomes, endless bureaucratic processes. But that is rapidly fading in the rearview mirror as we emerge into a futuristic vision that's powered by the artificial intelligence, and the supporting processes, of course, comes with that. AI's transformative potential stretches far beyond the simple streamlining of the internal workflows. It's about reimagining supporting processes like research, empowering the public engagement, even mediating legislative conflicts, ultimately propelling the drafting office into a new era of an informed, inclusive, and an impactful lawmaking. If you think of research, imagine research assistants not just confined to physical libraries, but equipped with a superhuman ability to scan vast digital databases in a flash. AI-powered research tool can identify relevant precedents that was set, case laws, scholarly articles, and that with laser-like precision, tailored specifically to a specific objective, specific law that you're busy with at the time. You can think of it as a Google search on steroids, instantly surfacing the most pertinent information across the globe and saving your drafters countless hours of comprehensive and legal sound information for proposed legislation. The second thing that, as I've mentioned earlier, is when we look at public engagement, complex legal documents often resemble impenetrable fortresses for the public. They just don't understand it. And that hinders a meaningful participation in the legal process. And this is where AI becomes the translator extraordinaire, breaking down the legalese into plain language. I think it's the UK's Parliament that have the Explain My Law project, and they exemplify this potential by using natural language processing and plain language processing to transform the convoluted legal jargon into clear, concise language that can be accessible to all. And that's what fosters active citizenship in the legal process. That ensures the broadening of the buy-in that you get and the informed participation you get in shaping the future. Lastly, I think an important thing is that when we are looking at legislation, there's always the option of disagreements between political parties, which are inevitable, and you can easily get into a gridlock. By navigating them productively, we can change the debate. IA can offer unique perspectives in the legislative, analyzing existing laws, generating alternative legislative formulations that can address opposing viewpoints from an unbiased perspective and give different viewpoints to the legislative drafters of what's possible rather than their known narrative. So I think those are the things for me that from outside, the public participation, the legislative drafters, the resolving of conflicts, those are the things for me that are external processes that impacts on the legislative drafting office, which can be impacted by the artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much, Jurgens, for the comprehensive and very interesting comments. Dr. Jaja, would you like to share your perspective as a legislative drafter and as a lawyer on this topic as well?
Yes. I'm interested in, since 2011, the Nigerian National Assembly, there became a requirement at the Senate and the House of Reps. If you bring a bill to establish a federal government agency in Nigeria, there was this requirement that you need to accompany the bill with another document called a compendium of financial estimates. Now, what it means is a rudimentary cost-benefit analysis to tell the legislators to justify why do you need a new federal government agency. Now, the duty of the drafter is to draft both the bill and this compendium document. Is a one-page document. You say this is the costs, this is what it costs the government to establish this agency. However, these are the benefits, the revenue, estimated revenue. 1 year, you need to give a 1-year analysis. I am seeing a situation where to prepare this document called the Compendium of Financial Estimates, AI could be used to generate the projections. What will be the costs to establish this federal government agency? What will be the proposed revenue? That is one area that we as lawyers who draft for the National Assembly, we could use AI. Another area is in preparation of the drafting of the budget document. We call it the Appropriation Act or the bill. Every year, lawyers who draft for National Assembly, you need to prepare the appropriation, that's the Appropriation Acts, the legislation. Now, it's a very tedious process. You have to, Nigeria has over 900 ministries, departments, and agencies. Each of them, the budget document this year is over 3,000 pages. So now what happens is some people, the budget comes from the executive arm of government, from the president, from the budget office. So each of the 900 agencies has its budgets, maybe $1 for the Ministry of Defense, maybe $2 for Ministry of Agriculture. It comes from the executive to the National Assembly. Now we redraft it, put it in legislative language. There's a problem there because a phenomenon has crept up called budget padding. So the figure we get from the president's office, the budget office, may be 1 naira for Ministry of Defense, But before it comes out of the National Assembly back to the president for assent, some people, unscrupulous people, jack the budget up to $10. So we call that budget padding. This is because the budget document till today, currently our practice is we use hard copy. So we do not have an electronic system where only the clerk has access to the final version. So because it's hard copy, there's tendency to insert figures into jack up figures by civil servants. So the use of AI could help to have an electronic system where only authorized persons like the clerk would have access to the budget document between the period when it's transmitted from the National Assembly back to the president for assent. Over the years, a lot of insertions happen. What we now do is there's a requirement that the Senate, President of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Reps, they have to sign each page of the budget document. The President of the Senate has to sign in red ink. The Speaker to the House of Reps has to sign in green ink on each of the 3,000 pages. Before that is the authentic version, before the president will assent to it. So this cumbersome process, even the process of making the budget, citizens are supposed to be involved. With AI or with digital technology, we hope that this process could be made easier and more transparent. This is one area that I think AI and technology could ease the process of making budget legislation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaja, for your very insightful considerations from the business point of view, from the legal point of view. Grant, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well?
Sure. Thanks, Luís. One of the areas I think that is important is to look at the areas of search. Jurgens said earlier, he described it as Google on steroids. What we're really talking about when we talk about AI, in many cases, we're talking about improved search. We're talking about a more holistic search where we're bringing together search results into a single holistic result. And I think that's one of the first things we're going to start seeing is that improved ability to find information. Another area that I think is going to be important is in the execution of law, in the interpretation of law. Even we support a function called codification or compilation of law, which is a downstream, once laws are enacted, the actual execution of the amendments found in the law. One of the amendments that makes me cringe every time I see it is the change this to that wherever appropriate. What does that mean? It's still always going to be a lawyer's decision as to what wherever appropriate means. But simply using text search is not necessarily the best way to find all the places wherever appropriate is. And AI tools could be used to seek out laws are sometimes written in obscure ways, sometimes purposefully. So finding your way through all that obscurity to find the places wherever appropriate is, so that you can correctly execute that amendment, I think is an area where I would start exploring the use of AI technologies.
Thank you so much, Grant, for the very insightful comments. Andy, would you like to share your thoughts and close this round?
Yeah, happy to. I think that, when we all start working in our various legislative drafting process, we naturally see an end-to-end process of steps. that often starts with policy and legal analysis even before it gets to us as drafters, and then and then finishes perhaps with the publication of law. If we look at what happens over successive governments, though, we might see a more dynamic system instead of just a more simple, linear process. I think we see that, different policies inform each other, amendments iterate on the law, laws that are repealed are sometimes reinvented, and so on. And I mention this because, thinking about legislative drafting as a dynamic system that's, evolves perhaps more slowly over many years, can give us a different perspective on supporting activities. When I think about what supporting activities can have the most impact on drafting effectiveness, I start really by thinking about the underlying policies that drive legislation. Good policy supports great law. It's not really necessarily our job to judge the policies of the governments of the day, but how might AI help with that? Well, I think if government as a whole is able to collect its corpus of supporting policy inputs and output measures and so on, then over time, this can be a great store of knowledge for dedicated systems to draw insights from. So, if you think about the officials that we work with, they need to do a lot of work setting the foundations before they even come to us for drafting support. And I guess that's one of the examples I see as a great opportunity for improving great law. AI is obviously great at identifying patterns and connections. So, I just see that there are really some great opportunities at that policy analysis stage to use this as a research tool. Quickly gather, a range of information, or consider a range of information sources and consider impact scenarios. A few other examples that kind of come to mind. Metadata creation is something I anticipate being more readily available to support publishing processes. And I guess to the last point, there's a huge number of opportunities around access services and search. I think, metadata and describing legislation takes time. I think we've already seen the use of natural language processing to classify texts. That's not new, but I do think the advances in AI, especially the large language models, will make equivalent services more widely available. And I think perhaps looking a little further ahead, we're going to see people using AI agents to support their search and research activities. So I think there are big opportunities across the legal research space with regard to the public legislation collections, and that inevitably will require us to make changes to some of the ways we are publishing our legislation, I think.
Thank you so much, Andy, for your considerations. We do have a question from a colleague from Indonesia here, but I will wait until after that following question I have for Grant, because we are still focusing on core IT issues, and then we're going to focus a little bit more on the business areas and political areas of this discussion. So, Grant, as parliaments and legislatures are increasingly seek to adopt these advanced technologies to support either the drafting per se or management of legislative texts and documents, The underlying architecture, including structured data formats, are important in enabling these technologies to operate efficiently. Given the complexities involved in processing, analyzing, and managing legislative data in a way that enhances accuracy, accessibility, and interoperability across different systems, my question to you is, what are the major technical considerations you anticipate in the further development and integration of AI-powered tools in the context of legislative drafting?
So I thought about this a lot last night, and I came up with 7 things that I felt were important considerations that we really need to take into account. In the earlier talks, we already touched on some of them. The first one was to ensure that the data being used is the authentic data. More than anything, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are very easy ways to exploit the systems to present misinformation. Even a website, even if it's published by the government, is still possibly a transform away from the authentic data, the actual information. It's gone through some level of translation and information may have inadvertently been added or removed. So to ensure that the drafters are working with the official text and not a derivation thereof. The second thing, which is closely related to that, is that they have access to the latest version of that text, and it is stored in a way that is adequately temporal so they can understand the effectivity of that information. This is something we've struggled with for 20 years. It's been very slow going, getting all the information, all the legislative texts in a form that they are usable in a way that we can exploit the powers of the tools and technologies that are coming down the road. And that I think we still have a ways to go before we can really start harnessing the full power of the tools that are coming. Something we touched on earlier with Jurgens is not only having the local data be access to local data, but also having access to external data. Being able to work with data coming from external sources, whether it's higher levels of government or jurisdictions around you, where you need that information, but you also need assurance that the information you are using is the authentic information and not something that someone has doctored in one way or another. The fourth area is to ensure privacy. One of the things that has been described to me over and over again is that legislative drafters are working with parties, maybe members of parliament, maybe special interest groups, but whatever they're doing before it is made public through introduction in Congress, in the parliament, is private information, and there can be no leakage of that information, even inadvertent. AI systems learn. They learn by watching what you're doing and adding that to their model. But whatever they learn cannot be inadvertently expose what you are doing. So they cannot, as you are drafting something, the system cannot suggest something that was suggested for perhaps an opposing party to the legislation you're making. AI systems can be configured to restrict the learning, to control it within a space. And it's going to be important to understand the privacy aspects and how that relates to client attorney privilege. The next thing is that the systems have to be precise. A lot of AI systems, a lot of generative AI systems are bringing together information and cooking it up to produce a result. But that's not suitable for a lot of legislative drafting situations. This is not a creative writing aspect. You're not just drafting information. You're doing a very technical thing of deciding how to change the law. You cannot lose or add a comma. You cannot lose or add a full stop. Everything has to be super precise. Last week, I spoke to someone, and he mentioned the cost of a comma that had disappeared in the taxes that he himself pays. a comma was dropped inadvertently, and that made a huge change in how the interpretation of the tax law was done. So it has to be super precise. And then the next thing closely related is it has to be accurate. I was talking back in December, I was talking to a lawyer in DC, in Washington, DC, and he described AI as a confidence trickster. That what AI tools often do is they are mixing together accurate information with misinformation in a way that is very hard to tell what is good from what is bad. About a year or two ago, I asked ChatGPT who I was to tell me about myself. It won't do that anymore. They've taken away that capability. But what it told me was that I had a CAD background, that I'd started the company 20 years ago with Monica Palmerani at the University of Bologna. Up to that point, everything was totally true. It was mixing together that the fact that I worked with Monica with the fact that I had founded the company with someone else and put it together. It looked all convincing. If it wasn't me, someone might have believed what they were reading because it was accurate information and misinformation put together. You need systems that don't do that. And you need to be able to discern one from the other. And that gets me to my seventh thing. In the last talk before this, there was some talk about AI being a black box. You put a policy decision in one end, and you get legislation out the other end, and you don't know how it got there. You need traceability. You need to understand all the steps from the inputs to the system and all the decisions that are made through that process to that end in a result. How do you get there? So basically show your work. When you're at school and you're taking a test, you can't just put the answers down. You have to show your work. And the systems we build have to be required to do that. They need to be required to show how they arrived at the conclusions they arrived at, not just what the end result needs to be. So those are my 7 things that I thought are important for any systems we build in this area.
Thank you so much, Grant, for these 7 steps. I have to say I took a lot of notes here while you were talking about them, and certainly use them in the future. Jurgens, would you like to comment on what Grant just shared?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to have Grant's voice of caution here, while I'm the voice of the dreamer and the hopeful one of seeing the future vision. And when we look at AI, we need to imagine it as, or I imagine it as AI bringing a lot of efficiency, inclusivity, collaboration into the process by the nature of what it can do. And I don't see this as a futuristic fantasy. For me, that's the promised land. That's what we're aiming to achieve. But like any grand edifice, a robust AI ecosystem requires a solid foundation, one built on structured data, data governance, and data, as well as a bit of empathy, as I've said earlier. For me, we can think of AI as a meticulous mason requiring well-defined blocks to build upon. So standards like Extended Markup Language, XML, that provides a structure allowing legislative documents to be tagged, categorized in a way AI can readily understand them, without us wading through the unstructured text. So one of the things is we've got a lot of document that's not yet in those standards. So I think one of the challenges is, how do we get there? How do we get these databases expanded? How do we pull information into the structured way to be understood so that we have more data to work with going forward? The other thing that's important for me is we need to look again at the cloud solutions for agility and access of these systems. We need to see silos crumble so that cloud-based solutions can offer us with seamless access, rapid automation, and not just for the sake of convenience. It is about universal accessibility, monitoring, quicker decision making, that drivers can much more better collaborate across the world, even on the same document. So for me, that is very important. The next one is that data, like power, must be wielded responsibly. It was mentioned by Grant as well. So it's important that we look at our data governance that's underlying our processes and our development of solutions. We must have a framework safeguarding, I think Grant has mentioned, accuracy, consistency, ethical utilization of these systems. And that comes through a policy that says this is our data governance. Think of it as the mortar holding the data edifice together, ensuring trust, transparency, accountability. Data governance is not just about checking boxes. It is the cornerstone of responsible AI implementation and protecting it against bias, upholding the very principle of democratic lawmaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Jurgens, for your comments. I saw Dr. Jaja raise your hand. You wish to make a comment?
Oh, yes. Nigeria is a federal state. There's the federal government, and there's 36 states. The Constitution delineates, that is, divides the legislative powers between the National Assembly and the 36 states. However, there are gray areas that are not specifically mentioned who has legislative authority. So, for example, hotel, gambling is not mentioned in the Constitution, whether the federal government or the state government. And just as you mentioned in Brazil, the state governments often pass laws on these areas that federal government, so there's always conflict. For example, when it comes to who should tax hotels. So the Supreme Court of Nigeria always intervenes and tries to settle the dispute. We have what we call doctrine of covering the field. Now, if the federal government or the National Assembly has passed a law on a subject matter which is in a gray area, every state, each of the 36 states is stopped from, they can no longer pass laws on those areas once the federal government has entered the field. Now, I see a situation where AI and then could be used, first of all, to have a database of laws so that we are trying a project. We have what we call in this capital, Abuja, there's a conference of all the states' legislatures. We want to build a project with them where we have a database of all the laws of, apart from the federal government that has over 700 laws, then the state governments, we want to have a database of all their laws so that in the event, before any state will legislate, start drafting, you look to the database to know whether there's an existing law. So you don't need to replicate such laws. Another area we want, or we envisage, we need AI is when it comes to amendment or alteration of the Nigerian Constitution. Is a very cumbersome process, Section 9 of the Nigerian Constitution. You require two-thirds of the states to vote in favor before you can pass an amendment to the Constitution. So two-thirds is 25 of the 36 states. You require, and you need to go around the states. We have what we call, you need a referendum or public hearing for each state to tell you whether they support the Constitution amendment or not. Now, several civil societies say this process is expensive. So instead of physically going from state to get the votes, we think of a situation where we could use AI, electronic voting, electronic transmission of the decision of each of the 25 states that we need, instead of going physically, which is more expensive. So these are areas we're thinking we could integrate AI into the Nigerian legislative drafting process when it comes to constitutional amendment and then the conflict of laws between federal and state governments.
Thank you, Dr. Jaja, for your considerations. Andy, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've heard a lot of really great points already. I'll try not to repeat what we've already heard. I think there are a few things that are top of mind for me that I'm thinking about here. The first is one of the challenges is getting access to tools that can meet our needs for information and data security. So, as this, as we see more and more of the opportunities unfold for artificial intelligence, there's going to be more technologies and more options for us. And many of these will come from, I think, actually outside of the legal domain. The challenge, of course, is that we have to be very careful about the technologies that we do use. One of the things I'm looking into at the moment, for example, is can we use AI to support the editing and proofreading process? And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking about that. And we see outside of the legal market many tools that can do incredible things for editing and proofreading of text in general. If we heard a comment just earlier about cloud services. Many cloud services are out there. One of them I use in a personal capacity for editing is something called Grammarly, and they're doing incredible things with AI. But that's a service that's not available to us in any practical way as legislative drafters because we have special needs for information and data security. And so that's something that I think that really weighs on me in terms of things we need to be watching out for. The second thing I think about in terms of how we might need what work we need to do to integrate or successfully integrate AI technologies, it is the adoption of international standards. Obviously standards like Tosa, the legal document ML standard. I think there, as new technologies are developed, we will get better support in our jurisdictions if we have adopted a standard. Software developers, if they have to build tools to support 100 different ways of doing things, that's less likely, right? Software developers are more likely to focus on doing one thing and doing it well. And of course, they will try and provide some other options, but the more that we as drafters can move to adopting international standards, the more likely it is, I think, that we will find tools that can provide the support that we need. Probably the last thing I would just add that hasn't been mentioned, I don't think, is access to training data. So, for various reasons, we may end up developing or customizing AI systems in our own jurisdictions, perhaps for data security reasons, perhaps for privacy and so on. But even so, I think there's a lot that we can do to help each other if we find a way to share training data. You know, the corpus of data that I have in New Zealand is small. And I'm sure that, you know, over the coming years, there are things that I can do with it. But if I can join some of my data with data from other jurisdictions that perhaps have similar processes or practices, I might be able to get better systems that perform better. So that's something also that I'm very interested in over the next few years is this, you know, question, is there a possibility of sharing training data that might underlie some of these AI models and so on that we're thinking about? Yeah, just a few thoughts there.
Thank you so much, Andy, for your considerations. We do have 20 minutes to finish the panel, but we have received a very interesting question from Lumina Mentari from the House of Representatives of Indonesia. So I will waive my own question that I had for you and use hers instead. And allow me to start with you, Dr. Jaja, this time. She's asking, in a multi-party system, legislative drafting can be a very sensitive process where every paragraph, every line could be debated and deliberated. This may cause distrust in using AI and other tech tools, according to her. So her question is, how do we transform these types of narratives for parliamentarians and politicians in a high stakes, high tensions legislation or debates, in your opinion? Would you like to comment on that, Dr. Jaja?
Yes, Nigeria has a multi-party National Assembly. And I'll tell you from practical experience, we do not do voice votes. You know how the presiding officer may say, all those in favor say aye. We do not even trust electronic voting because we don't trust that there's always dispute. So the best way, when a committee of the National Assembly, because we call it in National Assembly of Nigeria, we call it clause by clause consideration. Every bill, before it is passed by the committee, the chairman has to read the clause, section 1. All those in favor, you vote. Section 2, section 3. Then at the end of the voting, the documents, the bill at that stage, at the committee, each member has to append his signature to the final report to say, I have agreed with this version of the bill. You have to append your signature. Now, you need a simple majority, 1/3. If there are 20 members or 21 members, you need 1/3. You need 7 members to vote in favor of the bill at the version of that bill at that stage. So 7 members must append their signature to that bill before it goes back to the plenary for final voting. So if 7 members did not append their signature, when it comes to plenary, it is not. That's how we deal with it in Nigeria. The vote, your signature has to be there as a lawmaker. We don't use AI at that stage. The documents, there's a hard copy. Each member who votes has to sign that he has agreed to the bill before it goes back to the plenary. Plenary is when the entire lawmakers are sitting. Now, at that stage, the votes, the clerk has to get up and count manually all those in favor of the bill before it now goes to the president for assent. This is how we operate in Nigeria. We have not reached the stage where we trust AI to tell us the decisions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaja. Grant, you are technologists, and all of us are also let's say, evangelized already on the need for parliaments to modernize. So, how can we overcome this distrust, not only amongst members but amongst legislative councils, drafters? How do you see, as Lumina asked, in high stakes negotiations and discussions on specific legislation, how can we overcome distrust on the leadership in the parliament?
I think, from my perspective, I've already started seeing this distrust in the US, in Washington, D.C., seeing people being told, do not use AI tools, instructed not to use AI tools at all. So I think that's going to be very difficult to overcome. I think the hardest part is the not knowing what's going on in that black box. When the tools can provide some level of traceability, some level of explanation how they arrived at their conclusions, that will help break down some of the mistrust. But as long as it's a black box that you don't know what it's doing, there's always going to be some level of distrust.
Do you think initiatives like, for example, in the US, Congress creating guidelines or subcommittees on AI to discuss this topic, do you think this is a way to ease the tensions on this distrust, or do you think it's an inherent element of
I think it's going to be an inherent element for some time. What you don't understand, you fear. Until we get beyond that, until we get beyond that, this is going to be something we have to deal with. But we will get beyond it. We will eventually find ways to put aside those concerns. But I don't think it's going to be quick.
Lumina just sent another comment here. She said this also caused a debate between creating quantity versus quality legislation. That's her comment as well. Jurgens, would you like to comment this consideration from Lumina and what the colleagues just shared?
Yeah, thank you. I think the key thing is you can't take an AI solution and just solely trust that. AI, as the other members have already explained, has got an inherent risk of misrepresenting something. You have to bring expertise to the intelligence. So that's where your drafters still have to have that deep legal expertise of understanding and work with the AI, not just expect the AI to do all the work. And I think that's the key thing if you want to build trust. What we had on our next question is around also the new skill set that's required from the legislator or the legislative drafter, is they need to acquire new skills. They need to become the data unicorns. They need to be able to understand machine language learning. They need to understand how to optimize these systems. They need to understand all those type of things. Before they're not there, we won't be able to trust it. But at bottom line, I think it's always bring expertise, human expertise, and combine it with AI intelligence. Then you're going to get the best product, not when you have either the one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Jurgens, for your comment. Andy, would you like to close this round with your thoughts around how to overcome this distrust amongst drafters and MPs as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think this comes back to my, the first comments that I made at the opening of this panel. This is a change process. It's going to take time. Anytime there is an innovation in society, it takes time for people to adapt. And I don't think that we, just because we might see the potential for a technology, it doesn't mean that it's going to be quickly adopted. I think in this case, what happens outside of parliaments, what happens out in society in our private lives will also have a big influence. Because if we as individuals in our personal capacity don't trust AI experiences in our personal lives, it makes it even more difficult to trust them in our working environments, especially in an environment like this. And so I think as the tools and the services become more reliable across all areas of society, you will see people, parliamentarians, become more comfortable with the idea. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not still really significant challenges to work through, but for me, it always comes back to small steps. You might not be able to achieve your ultimate goal with an AI technology straight away, but there might be a small change that gets introduced, a small improvement that makes it easier in some way, but gets people used to the idea and you start to build that trust, not by trying to solve every problem at once, but one step at a time. And I think over the years, the decade ahead will be very interesting, and we will probably look back and be surprised at perhaps how quickly it did change, because it will feel slow while we're in it, I think.
Thank you so much, Andy, for your considerations. Well, sadly, we are reaching the end of our panel discussion. It has been an honor to moderate you today. Before we go, I'd like to yield the floor back to each one of you to 30 seconds to 1 minute, just for any final thoughts that you might have. I'll do this alphabetically again. Andy, would you like to share any final considerations on this topic on today's panel?
I feel like I probably just made a closing comment, but no, just thank you for the opportunity. There's a lot to work through here. I think this is going to keep us busy for some years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Grant, any final considerations on today's panel? I think you're muted.
First of all, thank you, Luís, for putting this together. It's been really interesting. I think I'd echo what some of the things that Andy has just said. I think the decade ahead is going to be very interesting. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of new things to think about, a lot of models to change. And I think that we need to just see how far we can go in legislative drafting. There's a lot of paradigm shifts that will need to be made, moving away from thinking of things as unstructured paper and moving towards actual information and knowledge that we can mix and match and use together. That's a paradigm change that the legislative drafting has to make. And I'm hopeful that we can do that in the decade to come.
Thank you so much, Grant, for your final considerations and for your participation today. Jurgens, do you have any remarks?
Yeah, wow, it was a journey. We have really traveled today. We have envisioned legal research on autopilot, laws explaining, AI explaining laws in plain English. That is possible. We even looked at AI as a mediator for legislative conflict. And there's a lot of promise. but we must also know that it is not going to be a walk in the park. I think we haven't covered the question really on the skill set, as I said before. It's really important that we relook the skill set of the drafters and their capability to engage with data scientists, with optimization experts, if we want to see them succeed in their way. They must be able to talk to system designers. So their way of thinking, they can't just be any more still an expert in law. They have to be an expert in law, but also understand this world to be able to extract valuable information from it. So that for me is the key thing. Then maybe we must also say that AI is not a Terminator, like the movie Terminator. We can see it as an intelligent, informed research assistant, multilingual translator, and even maybe a debate moderator. There are many things it can do. But as we've ended up in the previous one, and this is my last point, is it's also not the perfect golden bullet and solution that is there for all. I'm still a big proponent for that combination of human expertise and AI intelligence. That is the true place where we're going to benefit, not when we try to keep the two separate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jurgens, for your participation and for your closing remarks as well. Dr. Jaja, any final considerations on today's debate in 30 seconds to 1 minute?
Oh, thank you so much for putting this together. For us here in Nigeria and Africa, just the basics. We need a database of laws. For cross-references alone, I can tell you, we repeated the National Assembly of Nigeria. We passed a law in the year 2000. Because we had no records of the law, we passed the same law again in 2003. That's our anti-corruption law that established so just that basic, having a database that is searchable, just having that is what we need for federal laws, not to talk about the states. So we look forward to more interactions like this where we share ideas and improve ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaja, for your participation. Thank you, all of you, for the very insightful panel. I have to say, I learned a lot. So thank you so much.